we want to develop a message board as described here, using only HTML, CSS and PHP. Messages are stored in a two-dimensional array. The first element of each message is the timestamp, and the second element is the message text, and we shall define and use two functions, display message and display messages, to get the messages displayed. The end result should look like this. We have a text area where we can enter some highly intelligent text, which then gets displayed together with the timestamp we need. So let's try some more. We see that the newest one gets displayed at the top, and then in descending order until the end. And we have different coloring, actually alternating coloring. We will look at that in a moment. So let's solve this problem. I start with an HTML file to get the HTML template because I'm just too lazy to type it in, and then I just change it to a PHP file. The title, of course, message board. We have here a text area and the send button, the whole in a form. We could even add the clear messages button to that same form, but I prefer to have them in two separate forms because it makes distinguishing the submission easier. So we will submit these forms using the post method. And we need two of those, and between the two forms we have an horizontal row. Right, in here we have a text area. We will give that one a name because it will contain the message that will be sent to the server, and let's make it auto focus to make life easier for our users. Then we need a send button, and here we need another button, clear messages. Right, let's take a look. That looks good. There's no functionality, but it looks good. Now, if the user enters the message here and clicks on send, then this message needs to get stored somewhere, because as we have seen here, the previous messages get displayed as well, but each time we click on a form submission button, our script gets reloaded, so normally all the data would be lost except for the last message that has just been submitted. So how do we keep track of the previous messages? Well, we could use hidden input fields, but that's a solution that in my view is not very elegant. It's more difficult to implement, and above all it's not secure, because you can just open the network tab in the console and see what see the content of these hidden input fields. So I rather prefer to use sessions. How do we use sessions? Well, our script needs to start with session start, and remember that session start needs to be executed before anything gets sent to the browser. If we do it afterwards, it won't work. Right. So we have started our session. Now the question is, how do we store messages in our session? Well, it says here that messages are stored in a two-dimensional array. So we will just create a two-dimensional array. and call it or store it under the key messages in our $session superglobal. Initially it will be empty because no messages have been sent, but in the following calls to our script, of course, we cannot just empty our session messages array, because otherwise we would erase previous messages. So we need to do this only if our session messages array does not yet exist. In this case, we will create it. I think we should do this correctly. So, if our array does not yet exist, we create it as an empty array. And now we need to see whether a message has been submitted, which as usual we can find out using the post superglobal, because if the message has been submitted, $post message will exist and it will contain the message text. And this message text needs to be added to our session array so that it does not get lost. How do we add an element to an array? Well, like this. Now, what do we want to store here? We do not only want to store the message text, but actually it says here the first element of each message is the timestamp and the second the message text. So the message text is easy because that is in $post MSG. But how do we get the timestamp? Well, our book might help us. If we go to useful PHP functions, we have here something called date, which gives us a string with current date formatted according to the given format string. And here is a ready-made example, so we will just copy paste this. This line sets the default time zone to where we are. That's important to get the date correctly. And now we will put the current date and time as the first element of our array. What does this string mean? Well, day means the day, D means the day, M means the month, and Y means the year, and H hour, I minutes, and S seconds. Obviously we could format it differently, but this is what I'm using here for the example. Right. So we have added the new message together with the text with its timestamp to our session array, but we still cannot see anything because we are not displaying any of the messages. Now we are being told that we should use define and then use two functions, one which takes a message as parameter and one which does not take a parameter and serves to displaying all the messages. Right. So let's start with display message. How do we display a message? Well, we will have to send some HTML to our browser, and that can be done using echo. let's put each message into its own div. And as we see here, the timestamp has actually a different font color than the message text, so we could use a span here in order to style it with CSS later on. Now we need to put in the timestamp, which is the first element of our message array, then a colon, space, and then we close our span, and then we need the message text, which is the second element of our message array, and then we close our div, the string, and the instruction. Now this can be used to display one message, but we want to display all messages. So we need to loop through our message array and display each one. It says that the newest message should be at the top. Now if we think about it, the way we build our message array, the newest message is actually at the end of the array and the oldest one is at the beginning. So we need to run through our message array from the end to the beginning and not from the beginning to the end, as we would usually do. So how can we do that? Well, we will find out where the end is, and this can be easily done using the count function. We want to count the number of elements in our messages array, and the last element will, as usual, be at the position count -1, and we want to stop when this counter is less than 0, and until then we will decrease the counter by 1 after each iteration. What do we do inside the loop? Well, we just want to display the current message. Which message is that? Well, it's the one at position I in our array. So let's get that wrong. Display message session messages $I. So this is the message at position I, and we want to have it displayed using our function. Now we have defined these two functions, but still nothing happens. Why? Because we are not invoking our function, display messages. Where do we want to invoke it? Well, the messages should be displayed beneath the clear messages button, i.e. beneath this second form. So let's just call it here and see what happens. Well, and we see already the previous messages. And the latest one at the top, which is great. What's not so great is that obviously the new lines get transformed into spaces. That's not what we want, so how can we solve this problem? Well, new lines should actually be turned into break row HTML tags. And our book, once again, has a solution. There's a function NL2BR, which inserts HTML line breaks before all new lines in a string. And here we get to the manual page. So we give it a string, and if this string contains new line characters, then it will replace them with BR. Let's give it a try. So instead of just putting in the message text as it is, we will use NL2BR and see what happens. this does not work. Why? Because obviously we need to invoke this function outside of the string and build the string using the point operator. Okay, that looks much better. Right. Now we need to add some styling. We should use colors lavender, light sky blue and magenta. So first our span needs some color, so let's add some style. Cool. Our diffs need some styling too, because we want to have the background color alternating. And if you remember, there's a very useful CSS selector for this purpose, end of type, and we can say the odd numbered elements will have as background color lavender, and the even ones will have as background color light sky blue. That looks much better. But nothing happens when we click on clear messages. So how do we handle a click on clear messages? Well, we need to find out that clear messages has been clicked. No magic here. How do we delete all the messages? Well, that's very easy. Like this, and actually we could just add this here. So let's give it a try. And the problem is, of course, I haven't provided a name for this button, so there's nothing in $post. Now it works. And that's it.